Good morning. Good morning and welcome to this pre-competition workshop, which is addressing the topic of design for aging. The workshop is being run by KTN on behalf of UK Research and Innovation. I'm David Calder, and I'm part of the health team at KTN, looking after innovation in the areas of health and care, and of course into healthy aging as well. The other KTN person, who you probably won't hear from, who's running all the technical background stuff, is Aileen Woodley. Shortly, I'm going to hand over to George McGuinness, who is the challenge director for this whole wondrous campaign. But first of all, can we have a quick look at the agenda? As a reminder, you should all have seen this when you registered for the event, and of course it's been live on the C-Event page for some time. But it's just nice to have a quick look at what's in store before we launch into the detail. One more thing before I move things forward again. There are a few housekeeping essentials which I'd like to bring to your attention. So there's a chat option in Zoom that you can use, and we're going to ask you to use that at a specific point during the morning session as well. But there's also a Q&A option in Zoom. They are different to each other. And when we get to the question and answer section, I'll ask you to use the Q&A option rather than the chat option. So please have a little look around at your controls and see that you can see those two options, because as I say, we'll ask you to use each one at different stages of the day, and feel free to use the chat amongst yourselves as well, of course. Finally, it would be really good if everybody who's joined today could stay on mute to keep noise down while we're talking, and also please keep your cameras off. And our panelists will switch their cameras on when they're speaking until we get to the Q&A, when I'll ask them all to turn their cameras on again. So that's what's in store for us. Those are the kind of rules of engagement, as it were. I shall now hand over to George, and he'll get the show on the road. George, over to you.
David, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, and welcome. And it's really, really great to see such a huge wave of interest in what we're doing here. So, as David said, I'm George McGuinness. I'm the Challenge Director for UK Research and Innovation's Healthy Aging Challenge, which this work forms part of. And I thought, to set the scene, firstly, a reminder of our overall vision for the challenge. And if I could have the next slide, please, Aileen. And I'd like to stress three important elements of the statement you see on the left of the screen. It's about businesses, including social enterprises, and social enterprises have always been there, and their significance has really probably increased over the last year as COVID-19 has highlighted the health inequities associated with deprivation. It's about supporting people as they age, casting a fairly broad net, so the focus is on maintaining and improving health earlier in the life course rather than on people in sort of statutory health and care services or being supported by them. And the ambition for scale, with an emphasis on the whole service that is needed to make an impact. And the scope is defined by the 7 themes you see here. That's the scope of the overall challenge, and has been drawn very broadly. And some of these elements of scope have been strongly supported by some of our earlier competitions. You know, for instance, Age-Friendly Homes has come out really quite strongly. So for this competition, we're looking in 3 particular areas. Innovation to support self-care and new models of care to support independent living. Sustaining physical activity for people aged 50 and over, including, for instance, active travel. And addressing that broad range of things called common complaints of aging, which will include mental health and issues such as hearing, eyesight, mobility, incontinence, non-pharmaceutical approaches to pain, the sort of things that serve to make people feel they need to restrict their activity and be isolated, and overcoming them can enable people to take a fuller part in society. So we're now 2 years into what was a 5-year program, and if I could have the next slide, please, Eileen. Our portfolio looks like this. So in the middle, that slice in the middle, is a set of interventions supporting innovations at different stages of a maturity journey. So on the left, Catalyst Awards, supporting very early high risk, high reward ideas coming out of research organizations and universities. And on the right, trailblazers with service innovations ready to move to scale. And we've just announced the 5 projects going forward with grants of up to £6 million in the trailblazers, so 5 projects going forward. Our investment partnerships in the middle are aimed at supporting SMEs through a combination of grant and equity funding. And we recently announced 2 new partners and all that. And all of that's been supported by a program of research with 7 projects now covering a range of topics and with an aim to help businesses succeed in this market, and a community of practice to share learning and insight, both within the challenge portfolio and the wider community of interested parties. So I suppose to the topic of the day, and on the way we've learned a lot, and Design for Aging is one of 2 competitions that we're launching this year. And it picks up on the learning from the trailblazers in particular, which attracted huge interest, well over 100 applications, and we selected 7 at the first stage. Looking at many of the other applications, they were based on what looks like a really good idea, but often not quite ready for a Trailblazer award. So sometimes this was a lack of knowledge of the state of the art. Others, it may have been the need to develop the partnerships they're really going to need to deliver at scale. So a range of things associated with really getting to grips with the idea and making it more business and project ready. So the 2-stage Trailblazer process actually also proved quite effective at shaping and developing propositions and partnerships. So we want to try and keep some of the flavor of that, and really so that applications are not just good on paper or an interview, but there's a clear feasibility of the proposal has been established, scope is refined, things like collaboration agreements are signed, and so you know that you've got something that will go forward. But I'd have to say that the Trailblazers also took time, and we wanted to compress that, and that's part of the competition that Julia will talk about later. So we're still putting the finishing touches on the Design for Aging competition, and that is in part for what today is really about, but our ambition remains for innovations with really strong potential to scale, to incorporate the best bits of a 2-stage competition without losing momentum, and we'll do that through a stage gate process, and to ease the financial commitment by easing the co-investment requirements, sometimes called match funding requirements. So it's much more like more standard innovation sort of levels of funding. So we hope this event will help you prepare for the competition, which we aim to launch in September. And we hope that you'll let us know your concerns about the proposals. Now, I don't promise that we can fix them all in a way that's fair to everyone, but we definitely want to make this competition a success. And that means it actually has to work for you as well. So enough from me. I'm going to hand over to your chair for the day and our innovation lead for the competition, Julia Glenn. So Julia joined the team earlier on this year and brings a really varied background covering an investment management and product design. And her most recent work before joining UKRI was focused on vulnerable people. So over to you, Julia.
Thank you very much, George, and absolutely delighted to be here today and chairing this, this pre-competition workshop. I think what we have in store for you today is a really exciting mix. We've got some great speakers, we've got some great content, and it's a real opportunity, as George has said, to kind of get involved, give us some feedback, and we'll be posing some questions during the course of the morning to help you reflect on your own design credentials and help you prepare for the competition. So thank you everyone for joining, and welcome. So if I can have the next slide, please, Eileen. So I'm going to introduce first and foremost my colleague Ben Griffin. He's the design lead here at UKRI. Ben has been at UKRI since 2015 and brings an amazing amount of commercial experience to his role and is a great person to work with. So Ben is going to talk a bit about the central design function at UKRI to set the scene for today. So thank you, Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Julia. I will share my screen. Hopefully this will work. Okay. Yeah, so thank you and good morning, everyone. I'm Ben. I'm the Design Innovation Lead at Innovate UK, which is a part of UKRI. And as Julia mentioned, my own background is in design. So prior to joining UKRI, I worked for 12 years as an industrial designer and latterly as a director of a design agency. And I've been asked to talk a bit about what design means to UKRI and why we think it's important. Move on. So first of all, we love new ideas at UKRI, but those ideas are always a means to an end. And what we really love is the positive impact that those ideas can have on our economy, for society, and for the planet. So we're here to help researchers and businesses create value through new ideas. However, new ideas can only create value once they're adopted and used by people. An apple is a great idea. It can keep us healthy, but only if we choose to eat it. And the reality is that human behavior is complex. It's often unexpected and irrational. So if we want people to buy and use a new product or service, if we want them to love it and recommend it to others, then it has to be desirable. It has to be helpful. It has to be frustration-free. If we don't design with people in mind, there's a real risk that ideas will fail in the market and their potential benefits will never materialize. The Sinclair C5 met all of the technical requirements that its engineers had considered. It worked, only no one wanted one because it was awkward, uncomfortable, terrifying, and embarrassing. So whilst technology is important because it can make new ideas possible, it's actually people that make ideas succeed or fail. We wouldn't consider developing a new product without the capability and the processes to make it work, the technical know-how, engineering, coding, manufacturing capability, and so on. And we shouldn't do it without a process and a professional skill set that makes sure the outcome is desirable and fit for purpose. And that's exactly what design can offer. Design provides a structured approach that leads to more desirable solutions with a greater chance of commercial success. It starts with activities to discover the problem and define the opportunity, identifying stakeholders, gathering insight, and understanding exactly what people need and want. Then it helps you to develop ideas that meet that need, exploring and testing options quickly and at low cost, iteratively refining ideas and developing them toward a final design specification, the right solution to the right problem, a clear vision of customer benefit and business value that will give you and investors confidence in the project. Design tools and skills contribute to this process in a number of ways. Firstly, with techniques to understand problems through the eyes of those affected, observing how people behave and why. It's not just a matter of asking people what they want or what they think of your idea. It's about building empathy and getting under the skin to spot latent needs, unexpected opportunities, and possible barriers to adoption. Design then contributes the creative skills necessary to translate that insight into ideas, finding different ways to solve problems, respond to concerns, and deliver more valuable, delightful experiences. This bit's about moving from the intangible to the tangible. And visual communication skills can help to bring those ideas to life so that people can understand them, respond to them, and contribute to them. But to really understand what works and what doesn't, we need to test ideas with people through mock-ups, prototypes, or simulations that recreate the user experience and expose any unforeseen problems. And the design process, again, encourages us to do that early and often, making important discoveries sooner so we can act on them before it becomes too expensive to do so. It's often tempting to spend time and money perfecting an idea and making everything work before we let people get their hands on it. But the more we invest, the more precious we become about those ideas. we're less responsive to criticism, and making changes becomes difficult and expensive. Designers understand how to simulate experiences quickly at low cost, so you can make important discoveries sooner and take appropriate action. Once you've done that and you're confident in the direction of travel, once you've done that and you're confident in the direction of travel, design can help you present your ideas in a way that's more convincing and compelling. Investors and customers are less interested in how something works and more interested in what it offers. What's the benefit of your idea? Why will people want it and pay for it? You can use design to tell that story, presenting a vision of a better future made possible by your innovation. So design can help you avoid costly mistakes, and it can help you convince investors. And when you get to market, there's more good news, because outstanding design is an effective differentiator, and it allows you to compete not on price, but by offering more desirable solutions and experiences that command a premium. These two electric vehicle charging points do essentially the same thing with the same technology, but the difference is design and over £500 on a retail price. So ultimately, we want businesses to succeed and grow through innovation. It's not just about a single great idea, it's about a company's ability to exploit and repeat that success. And design can contribute here too. The process and the outputs of people-centered design can strengthen customer understanding throughout an organization, helping to unite everyone behind a customer-focused purpose and vision. And design allows you to express that vision through the look and feel of your products, services, and communications, helping to build a strong, meaningful brand. A clear vision reflected in a strong brand is attractive to investors, and it acts as a compass for the business, inspiring new ideas and helping you to navigate opportunities and find the most suitable avenues for growth. It's also worth mentioning that this people-led approach can be applied to many different types of challenge and deliverable. There are specific design disciplines that specialize in different areas, from digital to service design, but they're all united by a common human-centered approach. Here's just one example of the benefits of early investment in design. Let Us Grow have developed innovative aeroponic farming technologies that boost yields and reduce the environmental impact of agriculture. They understood the potential of their technology, but before launching into the development of a first product, they used a UKRI grant to carry out a human-centered design study with professional designers. And they credit that activity with a complete rethink of their target market and proposition, a stronger business case, and a better investment pitch. And in turn, that helped them to win a further £400,000 grant from UKRI and to secure £460,000 of pre-seed and £2.35 million of seed funding. And they've since gone on to generate their first sales revenue and grown from 3 to 21 full-time employees. Jack Farmer, the very appropriately named co-founder, said, "We learned so much about how to engage with customers. It's dramatically changed the way we work and the solutions we've developed. The design process helped us explore and figure out exactly what was needed, rather than rushing to launch something to market and then chasing down problems later." So I'll finish by revisiting the title of the session, The Role of Design at Innovate UK. It's to de-risk and boost returns on our innovation investments. We believe that great design can help the companies that we support to better understand their customers, to create solutions that are more desirable and fit for purpose, to test those ideas with people, spot problems sooner and react accordingly, so that the solutions they develop are more likely to be adopted and therefore create value. If you want to find out more about design at Innovate UK, you can read our design and innovation strategy, and I'll put a link to that in the chat box once I've finished. But that's all from me. So thanks for giving me your time this morning, and hope that you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. That was really interesting. And what I love about that is you set things up nicely for me to go straight into the people-centered design ethos. So thank you very much, Ben. So leading on from Ben's introduction to the design function at UKRI, we're now going to talk through the Healthy Aging Challenge and the proposed scope. So do remember, as I'm presenting, that this is your opportunity to comment on our thinking and your opportunity as the morning plays out to ask questions of some of the experts here in the room. And it's, as George said, we're not going to be able to accommodate every single angle on this, but we really do want to bring you with us in terms of we're looking for some really great applications, and we're looking for absolutely, as Ben has positioned it, we're looking for that design empathy and that people-centeredness. So I will now talk through the competition, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions about the scope and profile at the end of the morning, and all of this information will be available after the event too. So if I can have the next slide, please. So just to consolidate what George was saying as he opened the competition, taking Ben's design introduction, we're now thinking about this specifically in terms of our Healthy Aging Challenge. So in terms of setting the scene and being very explicit about what we're trying to achieve, it's about absolutely narrowing the gap between the experience of the richest and poorest. So the inequalities point that George made as he opened today's event, we're looking for everyone to remain active. So it's this idea of flourishing into old age and remaining active, remaining connected. And we want to find solutions that we can deliver at scale. And as well as the positive economics and the philanthropic and societal good of the challenges ethos, we always like to remind entrepreneurs and innovators that this market is a huge addressable market. So 1 in 12 of us will be 1 in 12 of us now are over 75, and by 2040 this is going to rise to 1 in 7. So all of us are aging, and it's how all of us can flourish to be our best self and enjoy the gift of life. So if I could have the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk you through the Design for Aging competition, which is launching in September 2021. So can I have the next slide, please? So this competition presents an opportunity for businesses and collaborative partners to receive up to 2 million in grant funding to advance your business. We are looking to fund eligible project costs for up to 2 years. So we're looking for discrete projects that will deliver in less than 2 years. And the exciting thing about this competition is that it's not just an opportunity to obtain grant funding, it's also an opportunity to leverage our unique design stage gate mechanism, which will help you really get on track in terms of people-centered design and really reflect on your own co-creation capabilities and make your organization more sustainable longer term by listening to your customers and understanding your customer journey. And it will make you more likely to capture your optimal market share in the longer run. So we feel that this competition is something very special because it's an opportunity to get grant funding and to really put your design principles through a very supportive mechanism that will yield better results. So could I have the next slide, please? So this is our competition profile. And remember, as we work through the profile and the scope, we welcome feedback. This is a pre-competition event. We are wanting to listen to the market and to see everybody's views. And so we're launching September 21 and today's pre-competition workshop, 1st of July. So we've got around 14.5 million funds available. And the project duration, as I said, is 2 years, with the stage gate coming 6 months after the project start. So we'll be making project awards in April 2022, and we'll be funding very generous grant awards from between £500,000 to 2 million. So thus the design stage gate, because it's perfectly reasonable with these grant award sizes to make sure that design rigor is being carried out. So in terms of research stage, we're looking at applied industrial research. So we're looking for new knowledge applied. New knowledge applied in terms of market understanding to services and servitized products. And these could be services and products or servitized products that are already in the market, but perhaps aren't yielding the utility they could yield because new knowledge hasn't been applied. So lots of opportunity to bring forward some interesting innovations. The way we fund is according to organisations' size. So large organisations will receive up to 50% of project costs, and small and micro organisations up to 70%. So if I can have the next slide, please. So this is the competition profile, and I think this is a really interesting profile because it allows so many contenders to apply. So we're looking at service-led innovation. You'll notice that service-led innovation is a repeated theme here. So service-led innovation that enables self-care and new models of care for independent living. So very keen to encourage sustaining physical activity, and it's been really good to talk to so many businesses who are interested in the competition already, who are innovating in this space, so that's great. And echoing what George said as he opened the competition, we're looking for service-led innovation that addresses the common complaints of ageing, with mental health being a key player in that. So you'll notice that there's no big statements about technology. Of course, we're really interested in technically led innovations, but going back to Ben's point, what we want to see is people-centered design. We want to see empathetic design that includes technology, but in non-invasive ways and ways in which people can work with them, interact with them, and flourish because of them, and not have them applied. So very interesting scope, and I think broad enough to give many innovators some real opportunity. So in terms of applicant profile, we're looking for business-led applications, but very, very happy to hear from collaborations. I know there's lots of very interesting collaborations in the offing, and I've spoken to lots of businesses who have some amazing collaborative opportunities, and that's something we absolutely encourage. And today is a good opportunity to ask questions about that, and maybe see who else is in the room. Very definitely service innovation. A lot of businesses have come to me in advance of the competition and talked through a product solution, and those are all great, but in order to have a chance with this competition, you do need to think about a service wrapper or service application. And I always say there's a very thin line between where a product ends and a service starts. So if you have a really robust product that addresses some of the scope issues above, then the way to get it included in this competition would be to develop that service wrapper around it in a people-centered approach. So solutions must address inequalities in healthy aging, and that can of course be via your business model in terms of how you intend to take your service to market, or how your service is already operating in market, but how you're going to extend it. And we ask that those who apply have an innovation that is sufficiently tangible to be shaped by the design stage gate. So ideas are great, and there's lots of places within our umbrella for ideas. We have a community of practice workshop, which we will share details about during the course of the morning or after the event. And the community of practice allows people to come and share ideas, but what we want from this competition is something tangible, something that's already defined, something that probably has some customers engaged already, so we can apply that rigor of the design stage gate and really yield the results to help your organisation grow and scale. So assessment is written and interview, the standard UKRI ultra transparent process. So if I can have the next slide, please. So this is a timeline for the competition, which is quite timely because someone's just posted a question about that in the chat. So application process, competition formally opens in September, and there will be another online event which will signpost people through the application process and more details about the competition, the assessment process, etc. So we'll be handing out grant awards to applicants who are successful in April 2022. We're planning to probably run the assessments in December. And so 6 months in, this is the unique bit about the competition. We'll be applying the design stage gate, and I'm going on to talk a bit about what that comprises of in the next slide. And then the competition runs for, your project will run for up to 2 years, provided you pass that stage gate point at 6 months after your original funding. And to make it very clear, we want you to pass, and we'll be there to shepherd you through the process. And so if I can go on to the next slide, I'll talk you a bit through what the design stage gate is. So we call this the design stage gate amplifier, because the idea is that this is a value mechanism. So by applying these people-centered design principles, you're able to amplify your chances of success because you understand your market, your user engagement has helped proliferate your innovation through the market, and will make your organization more robust and more sustainable. So criteria 1 is user engagement. So we'll be looking quite closely at how you work with your users, going back to Ben's points in his presentation about how user engagement helps shape your offering much more specifically for your market. We'll be looking at your people-centered design principles, and we'll be looking particularly at the feedback mechanisms that you use to take people's feedback and apply that to your innovation, and how you evolve that innovation in light of that feedback, because it is that feedback that is such a huge asset in the innovation process. Constantly applying feedback from the community into the innovation process will take you exponentially further than if you didn't do it. So we'll be looking at take up and acceptance within that practice community, because we say that if something has legs, we will see it proliferate through the practice community, and then we can sit down and we can say, well, actually, because of applying points 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the gate criteria, we're actually able to revisit commercialization plans and say that proof of market statistics can actually be augmented, because we have a real people-centered proof map, as it were, that this innovation yields utility, that this innovation is fit for market. So then we ask that you update your business plan. So again, your business plan is another asset. It's another piece of collateral for your robustness going forwards. So we ask that you update your business plan so it's a fair view in terms of all the work that you've done around people-centered design. So the idea of this absolutely is that it's an amplifier. It's not something that's punitive. It's something that will amplify your chances of success if you pay the appropriate due diligence to it. So if I can have the next slide, please. So to summarize on the design stage gate, it's set up to focus, help you focus on your user engagement, your human-centered design rigor. Remember, going back to Ben's point, good design is always empathetic. Good design is always people-centered, and it will help you focus on using your feedback and how you leverage feedback as an asset, and using co-creation to give your organisation the best chance of success. So we think it's a really, really exciting competition. We think that there's lots of value to be had in applying, lots of value to be had in being part of the journey, and a real opportunity to actually address some of the core mission and vision in terms of seeing people flourish into older age. So thank you very much. If I can have the next slide, I think that is my last slide. And thank you, and we'll have questions at the end. So if I can have the next slide, I will introduce my next speakers. So that's it for me on the competition front. I'm now going to introduce Alex Mitchell, who's Strategic Partnerships and Engagement Manager for Voice. Voice is a fantastic organisation. It's an organisation that's built on citizen representation. It's been an absolute joy to work with Alex, and he's got a really good presentation coming up. I'm also going to introduce Ros Wilson, who's an extremely active Voice member and has been involved in some amazing advocations, including the future of banking. So she'll be talking today. So Alex, over to you, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Julia. Hi, everyone. As Julia said, I'm Alex Mitchell. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Manager for the UK's National Innovation Centre for Ageing and Voice. But as Julia mentioned, I'm merely the support act today because you'll also be hearing from Ros Wilson. But before we hear from Ros, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the National Innovation Centre for Ageing and Voice and what we do. And then I'm going to cover what citizen involvement actually is, and importantly, what it is not. So we're going to have a look at some common kind of misconceptions around actively involving citizens in innovation. Next slide, please. Okay, and before we dive right in, I'm hoping to encourage a little bit of audience participation here. So throughout the next half an hour, if you can please feel free to comment in the chat box, not the Q&A, but the chat box, with what you feel are potential barriers to involving citizens in innovation co-design. And if you could start that comment with the hashtag barrier so we can easily see it, that would be great. And also, just to be a bit more positive, if you could pop into the chat what you're hoping to get out of involving citizens in your product and service design. And if you could start that with the hashtag hope, again, just so we can spot it a bit easier, that would be fantastic. And again, if there's any questions that you've got about citizen involvement, pop them in the Q&A box, and Ros and I will be around at the end of the event during the Q&A session to answer any of those questions. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the UK's National Innovation Centre for Ageing? So we're a world-leading organisation supported by an initial investment by UK government and Newcastle University. And our remit is to help co-develop and bring to market products and services that create a world in which we live better for longer. So we bring together cross-competence professionals and researchers, commercialisation experts, scientists, innovators, technologists, and we work closely together with the public in a seamless way, facilitating that exchange of intelligence and backgrounds. But crucially, our mission is to add intelligence to aging and longevity, or as we call it, aging intelligence. Because I think everyone will agree, I think what the world needs more of today is intelligence, but what do we mean by intelligence? So intelligence is everywhere. It's in our collective work, it's in our research, it's in creating tools and solutions that were unimaginable just a few years ago. Intelligence is in data, so from a wide range of sources, initiatives and projects. But what we really concentrate on is that intelligence is also in human experience. And that's what obviously we're focusing on today throughout this event. Human experience is perhaps the most important intelligence of all. It's in those shared insights, those human experiences, human emotions, the nuances of emotions, and it's in individual knowledge and collective wisdom. And we harness this intelligence through voice. Next slide, please. Rob, the next, yep, thank you. So voice stands for valuing our intellectual capital and experience. We've been operating for over 14 years now, and we're an international network of citizens, or as we know our members as co-designers. We facilitate sharing their insights and their lived and professional experience to help us identify unmet needs, priorities, and aspirations of the public related to healthy aging. So we have retired architects working on projects looking at multi-generational homes. We have retired product designers helping to design new products and services for healthy aging. And voice members work in partnership with businesses to de-risk innovation. So it's utilizing that experience of the public through the innovation journey. So from concept, from that good idea, to a commercially available product or service. Now, we've recognized the need to reach and connect different communities. So we've launched and evolved a series of digital platforms to facilitate that international dialogue and debate around aging and longevity. And what we're doing is closely collaborating with selected partners to rapidly expand across the globe, so to connect those international communities. And therefore, what we're doing is growing this international community of what we like to call innovation savvy citizens. So recently we've established a chapter on the US East Coast in New York, and we have pending chapters in Singapore, Canada, and Australia. And that's really important to see how different communities are aging. What are the differences? What are the individual needs of communities around the world? And we're doing this to essentially further our mission of co-designing, co-developing, and testing in real world and real-time settings, because essentially this is what's needed to ensure that innovations are meeting the growing and evolving needs of society. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is how we do it. I'm not going to go into this in too much depth, but as you can see here, we've developed an aging intelligence and experience and design approach. And it shows how we focus on the needs and wants of the individual. We don't use abstract personas. We always use real individuals, or always utilize the experience of real individuals. We also highlight here how much emphasis we put on collaboration. So through the National Innovation Centre and Voice, we support businesses to navigate to other partners. We have very strong links to organisations, community groups, patient networks across the country and beyond, to ensure that we can support businesses as being that kind of one-stop shop for citizen co-design needs. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to take a step back a little bit and just look at what true citizen involvement actually is, because I think there are a number of misconceptions. The first one that we have is that it's simply market research. It's what we hear the most. And actually it's not. Market research is usually implemented once you have a finished product. and you want to know how to sell it to your target audience. Now, it might be used in the early stages to gather opinions of target users, but that's it. It's very much a light touch approach, and it gives you a snapshot of insights from one particular moment in time. And in terms of a power dynamic, the power very much is with the business or facilitator. But if citizen involvement is done well, it should feel like that equal partnership. And that's what we always promote through Voice. You're working on something together, and so it should be collaborative. And at the end of the day, the citizens that you're involving are the experts. And I think that's something crucially that everyone has to realize, that they are experts by experience. They're going to be the end users of your innovation. And co-design enables you to take your users with you on a journey. So facilitating that deep insight exploration. So by actively involving citizens, they'll feel a part of the innovation process, and you'll actually find that the insights that you receive and the conversations that you have will be really beneficial to the development of your product and service, because they'll feel a part of that process. Next up, we have tokenism. So effectively going through the motions to look as though you're involving citizens in the development of your innovation, usually for the sole reason that it looks good to funders or investors, but it effectively benefits no one. And that's why this design competition is absolutely fantastic and needed, because with the design stage gate, it really avoids that tokenistic approach to citizen involvement. Because it isn't tokenistic, it's a real valuable, integral, and we've been doing this for years, enjoyable process of the innovation process. It's not something you should just do to secure funding. It's something that you should do for the success and the impact of your innovation. Because as I mentioned earlier, it essentially de-risks innovation. And how does it de-risk it? We'll move on to point 3. It's because it's not a one-off. It's because you're involving citizens at the key stages throughout the innovation pathway. It's not a one-off thing. Citizen involvement should not be an activity that you do once. Never feel like one workshop, one interview, one conversation, one survey is enough. It really should be embedded throughout the innovation pathway as you design your new product or service. Finally, it's not an out-of-the-box approach. There's not one simple out-of-the-box approach to citizen involvement. There are key rules to bear in mind, but you must be flexible, and it must be an iterative process. Always have a plan for how you're going to carry out your citizen involvement, but be prepared to change that plan 100 times, depending on the insights and the feedback that you're getting from your users. Next slide, please. Okay, so making it happen. So we've established what citizen involvement is and what it most certainly isn't, but how do you make it happen? One point I would stress here is that as a valuable part of the innovation process, to do citizen co-design well, you need to allocate funding for it. And to do it very well, we would also say that we would recommend that you allocate approximately 5 to 10% of your project costs in order to do this well. So this funding will cover reimbursement costs for public time, effort, and contributions. The public should never be out of pocket for being involved in your project. So therefore, things like travel and refreshment costs for any in-person workshops should be covered. Now, these are all costs that people don't immediately think about when they're thinking about citizen co-design. The users that you're involving might also have caregiving responsibilities. Depending on what product or service you're developing, you might be looking to involve the voices of informal caregivers. And so being able to cover the care costs for those informal caregivers whilst your users are at your co-design workshops, it'll be a much appreciated and needed support for those individuals. The funding can also be utilised to engage the support and services of organisations that are set up to help you with your citizen involvement, such as Voice, such as the National Innovation Centre. And the next thing I would say is don't reinvent the wheel, because when it comes to accessing consumers, to accessing your users, organisations such as ours are set up to do that very thing. So working in collaboration with wider networks, we can ensure that you can access a diverse cohort of users across the country and beyond. So look to see what established systems are out there that you can access. You don't have to start from scratch with this. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just want to give a brief example of one of the many examples of user co-design. And this is a prototype of an intergenerational kitchen. To give a bit of context, obviously we are living longer, house prices are high, land is scarce, and it puts new pressures on how we live as a society. Now, one solution is multi-generational living. So multiple generations living in the same home. So the National Innovation Centre and Voice collaborated with leading kitchen designer called Johnny Gray and leading academics to reinvent an integral part of the home, so the kitchen. So we hosted insights gathering sessions with Voice members who crucially had experience of living in multi-generational homes. So together we explored a working kitchen, highlighted what the issues are, what the unmet needs are, and what the aspirations are for their own living spaces. And then by coupling cutting edge design with the latest in smart home technology, we developed a kitchen which has sensors embedded throughout to facilitate all aspects of daily life. So it promotes recipes for healthy living. It has temperature control functionality. It has surfaces which could be lowered or heightened. And now it's a space where families of 4 or more generations can live and work together. So whether you've got a small child walking around or you've got an older relative using that kitchen, the kitchen is safe and it is a functional place for all these generations to live together. But it's a perfect example of identifying a future trend. So multi-generational living, exploring the needs and aspirations of users, and then co-designing with users a solution. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm really happy to introduce this next person. Ros Wilson is a member of Voice and has been involved in many Voice design and healthy aging projects, including workshops with the Design Council, with Zinc, and she's been on national steering groups, for example, with the James Lind Alliance. And Ros has also been involved in the Healthy Aging Grand Challenge competition. So she's reviewed funding proposals and she's also been a citizen judge on funding panels. So she's got incredible insight into what members of the public can bring to innovation and the innovation and the design process. So without further ado, Ros, over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and good morning. So why bother involving older people in design? What can we tell you that you do not know already? Well, if you suffered from arthritis and your fingers had lost the dexterity needed to use a keyboard, imagine how easier life could be using speech instead to communicate with your devices. That dream has already been realized and may not have been aimed at as a solution for arthritis sufferers. But user input like this can draw attention to difficulties experienced by some that can turn into achieving better outcomes for many. Good design can be good for everyone without stigmatizing those in older age. I have been privileged with other members of Voice to be invited to participate in panels and workshops seeking to help people age healthily and keep living independently longer. And I've contributed to and witnessed how the inclusion of older citizens' views have improved the development of ideas aimed at benefiting healthy aging, but also in preventing the progression of ideas that either older people would not or could not use. Do you wonder why, for instance, we do not see a greater variety of mobility vehicles or even tricycles on our roads? Many might benefit from them. However, they highlight that their users are old, and those who are old do not want to be stigmatized as being old. Of course, as we have advised inventors, the downside of the development of any mobility aids is also that their use, if not entirely necessary, may cause more health problems than they solve for older users through lack of exercise. Neither do we accept restrictive and ageist concepts that, for instance, wrongly suppose older drivers are a danger to others on the road. Statistically, they are not. Older drivers have less accidents than younger drivers. They avoid rush hours, congested roads, and generally drive shorter distances. And we know that cars can be a lifeline to accessibility and avoiding isolation for many. Individual experience in earlier life helps the judging process too. Previously, I have been a lay exercise instructor for older people and have been pleased to contribute my experience to projects. For instance, that rhythmic music can help dementia patients to remember the routines from one session to the next. And I've sought out projects that promote ways of regaining lost confidence after falls, and those that seek to remove the restrictions that impede participation in exercise. I'm often surprised at the stereotyped and ageist views expressed by both applicants and expert members of panels and projects, particularly of older people's perceived inability to use digital devices. The problem is that repeated stereotyping often encourages older citizens to behave in exactly the way society expects them to do. Older people do use modern technology, such as smartphones, computers, wearables, and remote-controlled devices. But how and how often they use those devices now may be different from how they use them in their working lives. And without that regular use, expertise can be lost. Good design might resolve this by using better signage or providing clearer and simpler instructions. With experience of care homes, we have been able to recommend that applicants obtain the goodwill and input of care home employees and carers first, if their proposals involve their participation. Carers' time is often already stretched to the limit, and they may not have had the background of training to be of real assistance. A good example of innovative design concerns the common disorder of aging, which is hearing loss. This problem happens gradually, and if ignored, can cause sufferers to start withdrawing from social activities in public places, which can lead to isolation and a serious deterioration in health. Hearing aids equipped with Bluetooth technology not only deliver clearer hearing, but also telephone calls, music, and other digital sounds directly into the ears. However, millions of people who would benefit from these devices miss out, as they do not come cheaply, so they are only available to the few. Apart from personally suffering age-related hearing loss, I am a healthy ager. Could that be because I exercise every day and eat a Mediterranean-style diet as recommended by health practitioners? Or could it be because I've done so for years and years and years? I know only too well, as an exercise instructor, that healthy aging does not happen overnight, whereas many projects, while well-meaning, often come in at a stage which might already be too late. Issues of aging caused by a poor lifestyle cannot be solved with a quick fix. Targeting a younger age group might achieve a better outcome for healthy aging. Areas of concern that have been stressed by other panel members include the loss of privacy caused by possible placement of cameras around their homes, albeit there to check their well-being. And they also worry about who receives the information from wearables or other gadgets which track their movements, no matter how good the intention. So what does this do for me and other panel members? Being involved in these panels and in voice opens up new avenues of thought and provides us with insight into cutting-edge research and innovation. Listening to often quite different expert views on these panels and the inspiration, but also constraints of projects proposed by applicants broadens our worldview. I hope to remain involved and engaged in these panels, seeking slick, not clunky, innovative designs. So what we older members bring to the table is that we have the experience of being older. We have experienced the stigma, stereotyping, and ageism that can hold us back from demanding equal treatment and good design of products and systems that suit our present needs and abilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Raz. Really like the point about the Bluetooth hearing aids, because it's a fantastic innovation. But as you talk about, what is the accessibility to all for them? What's the price point? Are they available to everyone who needs them? So yeah, that's another thing to think about when talking about design that will have an impact on the greatest amount of people. So we've now got a short video to show you of some of our voice members talking about human-centered design. So if we could just play the video now. Thank you.
For me, it means that these are the things which can improve people's well-being and people actually being able to do things which they could not. And especially people of my age, I'm sort of over 60 now, I would think that innovation can really help my generation.
It often sounds like a negative getting older and that you're a burden to people, and it shouldn't be like that. Innovation and ageing go hand in hand, they've got to. Because if we don't start innovating, we're looking at serious problems down the line.
How can businesses benefit older people? By accepting that the older person has a value.
I think to remain independent and stay at home, I think there are two facets that I'm interested in. One is physically, to help me physically remain at home, and the other is to help me remain mentally alert because I live by myself.
Because as the population is getting older and is frequently isolated because families split and move away, then to be able to maintain mobility and independence is so important.
People from all sort of walks of life can really impact on making things better. Ordinary people can give you really good ideas.
Innovation to start with, it's got to start with ideas, hasn't it? But then after that, probably I think about design.
So many things today help old people, but they're not necessarily designed for them.
And speaking as a woman now, not necessarily as an older person, quite a lot of design is not done for women anyway. You look at cars, you look at the size of mobile phones. Would something work for a 6-year-old and would it work for a 66-year-old?
Talking about design, we are talking about how things could work better. And design is one of the things which can attract people to use them more.
It's not just a question of making something that is targeted for older people, it's making something that we want to use, that we're happy using, and that really we feel can benefit us.
An exciting future of solutions that we haven't even thought about yet, solutions to problems we don't even know about yet.
Great. And I just want to leave you with a quote that I really love. It's from a business that has worked with some of our voice members in the past. So it says, on every occasion, there has been one of those jaw-dropping moments where we learn something from their responses that's often taken us quite some time to build into what we do. But I would say where we're at now is much better than where we would have been without that deep insight from voice. To me, essentially, that just means have thick skin, be prepared to take constructive or even negative criticism, and be prepared to change your innovation, sometimes in a major way. It's really the true benefit of citizen involvement. It will save you time, it will save you effort, and it will save you money in the long run. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex and Roz. That was amazing. Thank you. Really, really Good stuff. So, David, do we want to go through some of the questions that have been posted to those 3 hashtags?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just unmuting myself. Yeah, so I've collected a few of the comments that were on those hashtags in the chat. I shall grab a hold of them and give you a quick run through what came up. I have to say quite a lot of barriers as opposed to hope. So I'll try and mix it up a little bit. I'm just going to start from the top. So one barrier that's been identified is that citizens often lack the confidence or technical skills to be actively involved in online and digital innovations. So I know that's come up over many years of working in this kind of aging space. It's there. I don't know if there'll be any comments from the panelists later on that, but I'm sure it's something that's sort of gradually receding as people become more used to that. There's quite a lot. Another barrier is there seem to be quite a lot of contradicting opinions.
Like to hear.
Yeah, it's difficult to satisfy everybody. It's a bit like the kind of customer journey that some of the banks went on, isn't it? Where they decided that segmenting your customer base is nearly impossible and you need to almost produce a unique offer for each one. So it's kind of questions about that. Is there a way of satisfying all of the diversity of challenge which we see in any market segment actually, but of course in aging, which we're specifically talking about. Let's have a look at some hopes here. So I think that this hope is more of an aspiration, which is making products easier to use. Please, I kind of plead to designers and to innovators and to companies. I would second that with things like remote controls for televisions and, having experienced the horror of that with an aging relative. And another one really replays what I've just been talking about segmentation. How, can we, I hope we can do it. I hope we can find a way to the different segments and appeal to them and create an audience and a market which is meaningful for businesses to attack or to go after, I should say. Another hope was that in 10 years, that we as a society might hopefully be talking about lifestyle planning, and rather than design for aging, which, still has that slightly stigmatizing wording in it, if nothing else. So, lifestyle planning, something that anyone can be getting behind and doing.
Yeah, I think it's, sorry if I can just jump in there. I think it's
absolutely go for it.
Really important to say that innovation for aging, we're not talking about necessarily just innovating for older people. It is innovation for healthy aging. So one thing we do is we do a lot of intergenerational work. Okay. So we look to see how different generations can benefit from the wisdom of each other, but also by co-designing innovations with multiple generations, then you're also hopefully then trying to future-proof innovations as well. So you're not just developing it for older people now, you're developing solutions for people in 20, 30, 40 years' time.
Yeah, and there's a question in there which I hadn't quite transferred to the Q&A sheet, which we're going to cover later on, concerning the age groups that the competition's been aimed at. I don't know, you want to make a quick note of that, Julie, or something for us to come back on, I think, is how the scope for the overall competition and that kind of point about through life course link together. So we might need to talk about that a bit. Another one on hope was that, let's have a look. Basically, can we please make products that are user friendly, that evolve with people as their situation changes as well? So perhaps something that you don't need a new one of later, that's something that is flexible and personalizable as people and their situation changes. Let's have a look.
Goes back to the age-friendly design is just good design. So if you design a product that everyone can use regardless of age, then it means that that product can be with them throughout their life and they don't need to have adapted products later on.
Yeah, if you can do that in the design, then that's addressing those points. I'm sure it's quite a tough challenge, but we should be trying to take these on. What about the another barrier would be that this one's come up quite a lot over the years, is that obviously older people don't see themselves as older and disabled people would rather not, or don't see themselves as disabled. So how do you create products and services which enable them and the world to perceive them in that way, as in not disabling them further or stigmatizing them or labeling them in any way. I'm sure, again, something that vexes designers often in this area. Yeah, and one of the barrier, I think probably the last one to cover at the minute is recognizing that healthy aging kind of sounds simple, and we say it a lot on these kinds of broadcasts and in our competition documents and so on. But it's really about a lifetime of habits that, and experiences that create the individual. That, some of those habits are difficult to change. Again, I think people pick them up fairly young in life, actually. I don't think that's necessarily just, behavioral change is another subject in the space of health, well-being and prevention, which again needs to be considered when developing products and services, as indeed is stickiness, I think, and the fact that people ought to be interested enough in what they've acquired to keep on using it too. So that's a flavour of some of the things, Alex. I don't know if you want. I mean, I can send you this at the end, but a few of them are very practical in nature and maybe a little bit outside the scope, like the fact that clinical trials have become more difficult in times of COVID as a barrier. Yeah, and stuff like that. So I think that they're more technical in nature.
Yeah, it would be great to go through a few of these barriers following the event and see if we can come up with something that we can send around to people, Julia. That just answers.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And there's some really interesting things coming into the chat, things that things about the competition scope and structure too, that I think we can address at the end, just to make sure people are clear. But this is exactly what we want. We want live debate. We don't expect everyone to agree with us, although I think unanimously, Ros, it's been so helpful to have you talk about the user's voice and the perspective. I think that's been so helpful. So it's been brilliant to have you both. So do we now want to go into a break for 10 minutes? Before we go into the break, we're actually going to do a polling to lead us into the next speakers. So after the break, Julian and John are coming on, and they are going to be talking about the commercial aspects of design, and they want to basically get audience opinion on perceptions of design and application of design to help discussions after the break. So if we are able to take a break now and reconvene at 11:25, that would be great. Okay, thank you, everybody.
So hopefully everyone can see the poll now on their screen, and you can start answering that if you get some time during your break. And we'll see you shortly.
So welcome back, everyone. So introducing the next speakers, Jonathan Mathers and Julian Grice, both founders of the Design Age Accelerator. They're going to help everyone today by talking through the commercial value of design and also looking at the poll and trying to answer different opinions that came through. So thank you, Jonathan and Julian, over to you.
Hello. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. Eileen, can you just confirm everything's okay?
Everything's great.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I feel very posh because Julia is the only person in the entire world who calls me Jonathan. So as a boy from Glasgow, it makes me feel very, very upmarket. Thank you. Thank you, Julia. What I thought I would do today, I was thinking as the guys were speaking earlier about what a designer is, and I'm not a designer, but I was thinking about how designers put themselves in other people's shoes, and I was trying to put myself in your shoes. And going back to what George said right at the very beginning, which was, you know, we had 100 applicants for the Trailblazer competition, and we have eventually given funds to 7 people. And knowing that something like over 400 people have applied, have come to this webinar, you know, there might not be 400 people actually who attended today, but you know, over 400 people came to applied for this. And you must be thinking, my goodness me, it's going to be tough getting through this and getting my product into, you know, through the mill and being granted some money. How do I do that? And I think, you know, Ben and Alex and people have done a great job of telling you about what design is all about. So Julian and I are not going to bang on about what design is all about. What we'll rather do is talk about how you can use design and what the team will be looking for when they assess the product applications, the service applications. And I think Julia is absolutely right that idea of wraparound service around your product is really essential these days. What they're going to be looking for when they come to assess your propositions. So maybe if you could just move to the next slide. Aileen? Yeah. So, I mean, you might be asking, well, so what are these guys, John and Julian, who are they and what's their experience and why are they credible in terms of talking about this sort of a process? Well, my background is corporate design and agency. I worked for WPP for many years. I was the CEO of the Design Council for 5 years. We worked on things like the Transform Aging program. We set up Design Spark, which was the very first product accelerator program, Designing Demand. I now chair a number of awards programs, which is so things like the Design Intelligence Awards, China-based program. It's has the largest number of applications in the entire world. The Drum Design Awards, which are UK-based. Colin, who you're going to hear from later on, who runs the Design Age Institute. I sit on the advisory board, and I also chair the British Design Fund. And the British Design Fund invests in, it's a 3-year-old venture capital fund. It invests in well-designed British products. And I think the experience I've had with both Spark, the Design Council Spark and the British Design Fund, is going to prove quite valuable in terms of hopefully communicating some of the things that you need to be looking out for. Julian has led leading public sector brand and design agencies, and he's been involved in the corporate outsourcing of public services transformation programs like Growth Accelerator, MAS, and he now advises Entrepreneurial Spark, and he's an innovative assessor as well. He and I have actually been active in embedding strategic design in the healthy aging market. So we've been advising George and the Healthy Aging Challenge on embedding design. We've launched the Healthy Aging by Design blog, which you can find on LinkedIn. We've co-founded the Innovative Funded Design Age Accelerator. We're also project advisors to one of the challenges, the Edinburgh University Healthier Working Lives for Older Care Workers programs. We're also, Julia mentioned this earlier on, delivering the Healthy Aging Challenge Community of Practice Design Growth Program with this Centre for Aging Better. It's a separate program completely to this, but if you are interested in it, you might want to have a look at it. There's no link between what Julia's doing and the Design Growth Program. So I think we've sort of talked a little bit earlier today about how design is becoming more important. And I think if we go to the next slide, I'll let you read it yourself, guys. Design is backed from the very top at Innovate UK. And I think if any of you were coming along thinking, well, maybe if I bring a bit of design to it, might get through this. Absolutely not. Design is a prerequisite of competition application. And I think we ran one of the first webinars from the Community of Practice program last week. And the message that was coming through loud and strong was that design is no longer a nice to have, it's an absolute essential. So if I can have a look at the next slide. And the next slide actually again. So I think what we'd like to get you to think about today is a number of things, the number of questions that you need to be asking and the number of ideas that you need to be thinking about as you think about A, whether to put an application in, but B, when you decide that you do want to put an application in, what is that going to contain? So I think you've already heard about the importance of design, so I'm not going to go through that again. I think what I'm going to talk about is the sort of questions that we ask in the British Design Fund Investment Committee. And the British Design Fund Investment Committee, it's a bit like Dragon's Den, but except with two key things. First of all, we don't have piles of money on our seat in the seats beside us. And secondly, we're much nicer. So we're going to ask the questions about, do I recognize, understand, and appreciate the value that design can deliver? Maybe get you to think about, are you using design in the right way? And then maybe help you give some of the thoughts about what do you need to know about design to achieve your goals. So if we move on to the next slide. Why don't I try and bust some myths about design before we go on to anything else? So as CEO of the Design Council, I wasn't the first, and I know I'm not going to be the last to tackle the design industry's biggest challenge, which is how do you convince buyers, clients, investors of the value of design? And that's despite the UK having the reputation as being the world leader in design. And I think it's the irony I always thought was that to survive, the big UK design firms actually have to sell their services abroad to foreign competitors who do get it. And I know that when I was at the Design Council was always stronger and more recognized the further it traveled from British shores. So there was always a sort of irony about that. And I think, ironically, it's been the management consultancies who are the ones who are really embracing and recognizing the role that design can play. Over the last year, the big four have been buying the best service design brand agencies that there are, and they're now baked into everything that they do. And I think also it's interesting, Ben mentioned earlier on about Apple. And I think if you think that the world's most valuable company is built on a platform of design, and I think people sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that Apple is a technology company. It's not. In my view, Apple, all they did, and actually it was Jonathan Ives, who was a British-born and Northumbria University-trained designer, who worked alongside Steve Jobs, is now Sir Jonathan Ives, and was the director of design at Apple. He came along and said, look, lots of people have tried this technology in different ways. I think you need to really understand how people might use some of this technology and then design it accordingly. And I think Apple is successful because it's been designed well, not necessarily because it's leading technology. So anyway, let's just address these three questions. So design advice. Well, far too often it's perceived, particularly by scale-ups, as slow and expensive versus fast and high value, and there may be a high risk, a difficult investment, often by buyers with no experience. So too often I hear the people talking about design as a cost, not as an investment. But the reality is that strategic design it's objective, it's challenging, it understands and embraces other business models. But again, all of that is down to the capability of the commissioner. And again, I would urge you to have a look at the Community of Practice program, which can help you understand how to get the best out of design. Because I think that's, again, trying to put myself into your shoes, that must be one of the challenges that you're thinking is, how do we really embrace design and get the best of design to enhance and develop our products or service ideas better. Second one is design skills. And I think far too often design skills are perceived as the dark arts wrapped in a dubious process, dubious jargon. And it's there to design, it's designed to fleece entrepreneurs when it's mostly simple common sense. Well, the reality is that good design is actually a fusion of skills. And I think actually Ben articulated this particularly well. It's things like empathy, creativity, analysis, but it also involves the use of some pretty sophisticated tools. Julian's going to talk about some of them later on. Personas, customer journeys, blueprints, etc. And then lastly, well, what impact does design have anyway? Well, it's that, measurement is often intangible, difficult to justify ROI. Well, talk to the Design Business Association, the DBA, about that. For 20 years, they've been running the prestigious Design Effectiveness Awards. Talk to the Design Council about that, who've over the years run evaluations of the impact that design has. Talk to McKinsey, who are probably the most recent publishers of information about the huge difference that design-led firms have versus non-design-led firms, and the effect that has on things like market share, productivity, sales growth, team motivation, the speed of innovation, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so maybe next slide. Next slide. Hello.
Hi, it has moved. It's on number 1.
Oh, we've got a frozen speaker.
Yeah, I think John's internet's not great. We'll just pause for a moment.
All right, sorry. Obviously.
Yeah, that's a broadband problem.
Hi, John, are you back?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, we lost you for a moment, so you couldn't see that the slides had moved. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Sorry. All right. So my internet is a bit unstable. I do apologize. So Why don't you move on to Julian, actually? That's probably the best idea.
Eileen, shall I pick up from here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work.
Hi, Julian.
Go on, Julian.
Yeah, cool. Okay, good to go. So we've just highlighted 4 areas of design value that where the data is pretty clear that design can increase the survival of businesses. That's Design Council data. 91% of small businesses that invest in design survive after 5 years. McKinsey that John mentioned there are have conducted extensive kind of corporate market research, demonstrating that businesses outperform their rivals if they're investing in design strategically. And the Design Council's own program, Designing Demand, which was very successful, ran for quite some time, has delivered a 7-to-1 return for businesses participating. So lots of evidence out there, but not necessarily recognised and seen by entrepreneurs as proving that they should invest. Next slide, please, Eileen. So we've just picked out a couple of examples of projects we're working with through our Design Accelerator, which where the entrepreneurs are talking about how design is already delivering value right from the beginning. This is one. It's a startup service called Memory Tracks, and as has been stressed earlier, service design, which has grown to be a very significant kind of UK design capability in the last 10 years, is a fantastic asset that technology businesses coming up with app solutions should really be looking at. Next slide, please. So this is where I was going to pick up from John. It's the second question that we wanted to pick out today. Now, our Design Accelerator project, which is UKRI funded and is now about a year old. We've worked with over 100 entrepreneurs and designers in co-designing what that service is going to look like. And earlier this year, we ran our own survey just to get a sense of the entrepreneur's perception. We had around 70 respondents, and we've picked out these 3 questions, which we're sort of looking at today. The first one around value. I mean, the good news is that most people see designers as helping them improve their products and services. They're not necessarily translating that into understanding that a designer's role can help them strategically develop their business and understand their future market better. So a slight kind of gap there in that happy to bring designers in to understand users on the actual experience, but not necessarily to help understand how to grow that user base and expand it. The second question around what kind of services designers can provide to businesses. Well, again, half the respondents reinforce the understanding that design is there to translate insight and research into better propositions. Although very few recognize that design can help internationally in the sense of taking products and services into audiences in different environments, and designers are very good at understanding diverse marketplaces. So in fact, one of the Pathfinder businesses we're working with, they're a startup. They've been in market for about a year, and their major market is the US and Southern Europe. So, and they're working closely with designers to help them understand that. Finally, the good news is that a lot of people would like support with design. 86% would really use something. I mean, unsurprisingly, not many really want to pay for something like that. But then I think that that really underwrites our kind of key theme here, which is design is not being seen as a strategic long-term partnership. It's seen as a task, maybe a problem that needs to be overcome and usually it's brought in too late. So yeah, with that kind of view that design is rather tactically applied rather than strategically, I think we'll just move on to the next slide, please, which illustrates how we're going about changing that perception with the businesses that we're working with. And I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the Design Double Diamond. We've customized this for the market, and this is sort of a backbone process which designers would facilitate and take businesses through to gain consensus, to experiment, to reduce risk, to help people fail faster. And it begins with the diagnostic stage, really understanding what your market's about, discovering the key insights that are going to help you resolve and refine your proposition, developing that experience, and then taking it to market. And this is an overall process and approach which harnesses a range of tools and activities that are in the designer's kit bag to bring to bear in different situations. So we'll we haven't in any way got time to dip into that in any detail, but I just wanted to pick out on the next slide just 3 or 4 of those tools, which are recognized business tools, are used all the time by designers to help their business, to help their clients. And many of these are advocated by Innovate UK in Ben's design strategy. So the design staircase, which helps businesses understand where they are in terms of their commitment to design. Over 60% of UK small businesses are only at level 1, so they have very little design capability or commitment. The 3 lenses of innovation, very powerful way of ensuring that your solution isn't skewed towards too much towards technology or too much towards commercial benefit without understanding people. Value proposition canvas, translating pains and gains that you can identify from your work with users and personas into what your product and service proposition. So it's a very broad and diverse kit bag. Lots of designers will work with lots of different kinds of tools to help their clients through that process, and it's important for you to become familiar and help develop your own capability as entrepreneurs to use this kind of stuff. Finally, just before we go to the last question, next slide, please. We've just picked another little case study. One of our advisors on Design Age Accelerator, Personal Alarm Watch. They're really a case study that's been quite extensively publicized, but a scale-up business now. They've worked on the Transform Aging program with Design Council, and they started as a product solution through a lived experience, but they're moving and understand very importantly they need to move quickly to create a full service experience to grow their customer base. So that's a very interesting kind of case study to look at. I just want to see whether John's back online, or else
no, I am Julian.
Okay, John, back to you.
Okay. And there's a win-win situation, which is if I leave my camera off, you can hear what I'm saying, but you don't have to look at me. So there we go. So if we could have the next slide. So I think it's interesting about design thinking, and people will sometimes conflate design and design thinking, but design thinking is the sort of strategic management tool that people are increasingly talking about. And although there's a bit of a healthy skepticism in the industry, let's not forget that design thinking was featured on the front of a recent Harvard Business Review cover, and it was hailed by the likes of P&G as the thing that drives their business innovation and what sets them apart from the competition. So I think if there's 4 things, and I know there's been some chat, debate in the chat about whether we can share the slides. I think it'd be great if we could share the slides. But I think there's 4 things that you might want to take about how you use the design process and how you articulate the design process in your submissions. And it's these 4 things. In a way, it's a unique fusion of right and left hand brain thinking. So design thinking brings a blend of analysis, and it's the way that a designer can capture and synthesize data, particularly bringing, quant data together with qualitative data to provide real insights. And then how you interpret that designer's ability to translate research into insights that inform and influence behavior. I talked earlier on about the importance of empathy, designers' ability to walk in users' shoes so that they can, that thinking can inform products and services that provide gains, resolve pains. Too often our experiences, and particularly in the healthy aging arena, is that ideas that people come up with are based on solo family experience and not, like Alex said earlier on, the ability to tap into a much broader database. And actually, the final thing is creativity. It's that ability to translate user experiences into compelling propositions. And it's the thing that makes a difference. I was once, back in my younger years, I was the head of design and brand at Safeway Superstores, and we used to laugh with the buyers about enthusiastic, product guys who came in and said, "I have got the best new thing since sliced bread, and I'd like you to list it." And the buyers would love talking about, well, that's fine. So you tell me, what am I going to take off the shelf that currently sells 4 times the predicted volume you've got, has a margin 3 or 4 times the margin that you're giving me, and has a huge marketing campaign to support it. And in a way, if there's a summation of all of what I'm talking about today, keep that thought in your mind. So if we move on to the next slide. Actually, I'm going to, just in terms of time, move on to the slide number 15, the investment committee questions. So if you think about the questions that you're going to have to answer when you A, put in your submission, and B, hopefully when you get through to an interview process, I think the sort of questions that we look for in the British Design Fund when we have an investment panel, probably a good starting point. Now, we invest 150 grand at a time, and we always think about how that's going to be used. It must be based on users' needs. Often we look at great ideas, but if users are not at the heart and the start of the journey, it's flawed. So the sort of questions that we asked are, how have you used design to develop your competitive advantage? What's different about your product? What makes it better than something else? And one of the, it's a bit of an indictment here, actually. One of the things that we go through a huge due diligence process. And in the past, we've sort of relied on our applicants to give us the competitive landscape that they've looked at. And the reality is that often they haven't actually analyzed what their competitive market is. They need to understand what their future market size and growth rate is. How have they used design to optimize the product market fit? But actually, often it gets down to understanding the team. So when you put the team together, it's going to be really important as well. So why are the key members of the team involved in this product or service? What is it about the user experience that they've had that makes them interested in this marketplace. What is your product or service in your proposition going to replace? And at the end of the day, what is the user insight that has pinpointed the gap in the market that you see an opportunity to exploit? So if we just look at the next slide. So this is again one of the projects that we're working with the Design Age Accelerator, and I think these are guys who've actually seen a real opportunity. There's a dreadful incident of people falling in the night when they get up out of bed and go to the toilet or wherever, and this is just a lovely little idea called Bide, which sits by your bedside. And as they detect people getting up and getting out of bed, it sends a personalized, often a relative or a carer or somebody that the person will know, to say, be careful, take your time, don't rush. And the trials that we've done so far, it's been really, really effective at getting people to stop, think, slow down. And hopefully it's going to have a huge effect on stopping and preventing falls, which we know is such a burden on the NHS as people come in for that. So, okay, Julian, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, John. So just to wrap up, I'm conscious of the time that we've overrun a little bit here. But I mean, the good news for everybody out there is that all the data says that the market is just going to be booming, and which is not only, of course, a great opportunity for entrepreneurs, but it's also a great opportunity for designers to prove their value and to often, found their own businesses. I mean, some of the biggest Silicon Valley businesses in the last 10 years have been founded by designers. Airbnb is a great case in point. So I'm not going to labor this. I just want to flip to the last slide, please, which is, as mentioned earlier, there is a program being run called the Healthy Aging by Design Growth Program, which John and I are putting together with the Centre for Aging Better and the Community Practice on behalf of Innovate. As John said, there's no direct linkage between the two, but there are a series of workshops underway which started in June and will run through until October. So keep your eyes out for that one. And final slide is just a final case study to finish on, and it just reinforces the point. This is a Pathfinder business that the accelerator is working with, who are also, and it's also working with Columns Design Age Institute. These are world-leading car designers who are producing a new category product, but are entirely focused on the service that it's going to deliver and the end-to-end experience. So to Julia's important point earlier, thinking about using design across a range of disciplines, or looking for designers who can help you take products into service or service into products is hugely important. So I think we're going to close on that. We have the last three questions up. Those are the ones that we might return to in the discussion. Thanks very much. That's it from me.
Thank you very much. Are we able to have a look at the results, Eileen, of the poll that we put up going into the break in terms of John and Julian's questions? Can we just have a quick look at that? And Julian or Jonathan, can you just do a quick summary on this before I introduce Colin?
Well, it's on the hoof, Julia. But
that's how we work.
That's how we work. That's great, isn't it? I mean, we're either speaking to a bunch of people who are listening that are already bought into design, or else we've done an excellent job in the last couple of hours of persuading them that design is an essential ingredient for their business. So that's really good. So fantastic. And I think, I mean, it's great that, you know, 2/3 of you see design as a helpful way of improving my product or service experience. And actually, it's also good that only 2% of you think it's too expensive. So that's excellent. So good stuff.
Yeah.
What about?
I'll just come in on question 2. I think the advice on growth strategy is an interesting one, and people's generally this relationship with the designer to come in and fix something or address a problem, but really not taking advantage of designers' wider connectivity, collaboration, introduction into an ecosystem, just calling on designer for a point of view about the business and helping them to help you think about how you might grow your business. That's reflected in point 1, I think. But
and I think
well, I'm going to stop you both there and hand over to Colin. Thank you both very much.
All right.
So I'm going to introduce Colin, who is the director of the Design Age Institute. Colin is a senior designer with a range of commercial and philanthropic experience. Lots of design work with marginalised users. So pleasure to introduce Colin, and over to you.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon, everybody, and all of those who have stayed with us. 2 hours is a long time to look at a Zoom screen, so thank you very much for staying with us. I shall make my bit as painless as possible, I hope. My name is Colin Lowe. I am the director of the Design Age Institute, and you will see there's a photograph of me on my 75th birthday, apparently, according to one of these apps that you put your face into and it ages you. I'll explain what that's about later if I get time. I work for the Design Age Institute. We're part of the Royal College of Art, and for those who don't know it, the Royal College of Art has a 180-year history in art and design. It's the #1 art and design university in the world, as voted 6th year in a row, and it has 30 years of inclusive design expertise. The Design Age Institute itself is a relatively new organisation, set up just over a year ago, and it's been set up to become the National Strategic Unit for Design and the Healthy Ageing Economy. We're a partnership. There are 5 of us. The Oxford Institute of Population Ageing, the National Innovation Centre for Ageing, who we've heard from already today, the International Longevity Centre in the UK, the Design Museum, and us, the Helen Hannon Centre for Design at the Royal College of Art. And this is why we've been set up, put as simply as I can manage it. Over the last 12,000 years, the average global life expectancy has stayed relatively static until about 200 or 300 years ago. At that point, it started to rocket. And in reality, it doesn't show too many signs of slowing down. So we're experiencing an aging population by quite a bit. Just a few numbers, I'm sure you're all aware of these, but there is a big demographic shift going on. By 2040, 30 million people in the UK will be over 60. It seems like a big number, seems scary, but it's a great market to target, 30 million people. There is a financial time bubble accompanying that by 2040. Over 55s will account for 63 pence in every pound spent. And over 50s already hold 70% of all household wealth. Again, a great market if only if you can target it. There's also going to be technology proliferation. 70% of older adults are now online, rising to virtually 100% by 2030. Indeed, if that has not happened already, those figures did not take into account the last 18 months or 16 months of the pandemic. One of the things we've been targeted to look at is market failure, the economic situation defined by an inefficient distribution of goods and services in the free market. In other words, a group or selection of groups don't receive benefit for the goods and the money they spend. And why is that taking place? And we are seeing it. As people age, they do spend less money. When you get past 60, you start to spend about 2 to 3% less every year. Once you get past 80, then that accelerates a little bit to about 3 to 4% or 30% over a 10-year period. So as we age, we do spend less money. But the question is why? As we age, we spend less money, so suppliers don't design for our needs, or Suppliers don't design for our needs. So as we age, we spend less money. And part of our remit is to look at this and try to decide which one of these two statements is most true. But what we also know is at least 4 in 5 of those aged over 55 say their favorite retail brand does not understand them and what they need. So these people as they age, that's me in that category, pretty much, say that our favorite retail brands, our favorite organizations don't understand what we need and are not interested. I'd like to think as I get older, we will have products like these, like the Centaur, and interesting and stylized mobility aids. But the truth is these things are not on the market, at least not yet. If I want a mobility aid, I have to pick one of these, what we lovingly call the Blue Meanies. And they are functionally well designed. They do what they want, but I don't think anybody looks at these and thinks, I want to own that product. And why is this? There is a truth that as we age, our ability declines. There are not many 80-year-olds playing international rugby or at the Euros for England. And it is true that our ability does decline, but it is not important until you cross that line of transition, going from ability to inability. Otherwise, it's just not a consideration. And to be clear that only 26% of the population of people over 65 have a severe difficulty carrying out personal care or household activity. Nearly 3/4 of the entire population either have no difficulty or only a moderate difficulty. So the agenda that seems to be around designing for disability, designing for accessibility, while it is necessary for 1/4 of the population and for all of us, perhaps as we age, for 3/4 of the population over 65, it is not that important. And therefore, we like to talk more about interests. What interests people as they age? Again, one of the myths is that people become less interested in things as they age. We've found this not to be true, we think. People change their interests as they age. I am now 54 and I'm less interested in quite how skinny my jeans are, but I have other interests that have become more intense as I age. Also, this idea of wisdom. People do become wiser as they age. That does not mean that all older people are wiser than all younger people, absolutely not. Nor does it mean that having reached the age of 65, you are suddenly wise. That is also not true. What it does mean is that the 54-year-old Mike Tyson is somewhat wiser than the 18-year-old Mike Tyson was. And how we tap into and use that wisdom and people's interests is important in this area. And we like to talk about good design. I could give you a long talk about why everything on the planet has been designed, and it's either been designed well or badly, but we'll just talk about good design. What is good design? Good design makes products and services useful, usable, and desirable for people. And those 3 things are incredibly important, as in it solves a problem, you are able to use it, and you want to use it. You hear co-design a lot, and this is also important to good design because it supports this by involving users in every aspect of the design process, therefore ensuring that it's fit for purpose. And then inclusive design, which we know something about, which achieves this for as many people as reasonably possible without the need for special adaptation. But I'm going to put this visually. What does inclusive design mean visually? So you've got 3 types of users: those that might be excluded, the majority of normal average people, and the super users. If you just design for the super users, you get this, technically a very competent product that is useful to some, very few, usable by nearly nobody, and desirable by only the technologists, and therefore destined to be a very limited market. If you design for the majority, you by default involve the super user because they will also find it useful and usable. And you end up with products like this, which are quite nice and pleasant and easy enough to use and start to deliver values and increase your market share incredibly. But if you design for the excluded and you understand their needs, then again, by default, you're actually including almost the entire market, and you end up with products like this that are useful, usable, and desirable to almost everybody. And therefore your market sector is massive compared to the first product that we saw. And that to us is one of the definitions of inclusive design. It is not a disability aid. It is not designed specifically to be accessible. It is designed so that most people as possible can use it. As a case study, I'm just going to take you through something I was personally involved in. This was not through the Design Age Institute. We are still too young an organisation to have any case studies on market. But when I was design director of Red and Yellow Care, which is a dementia care company, we worked on an inclusive bath with Ideal Standard and the design company Studio Levine. And we did this because one of the secrets to success, as was mentioned earlier by Ben, I believe, is if the product doesn't get to market, it can't deliver the value that you've put into it. So working with a manufacturer who's got a readily known route to market is always very helpful. And this is the problem, that other than becoming too frail to live alone, failure to manage basic personal hygiene is one of the main reasons people end up living in supported accommodation, by which you mean bathing. And these are the sort of products that are out there, again, functionally do the job, but stigmatizing, ugly, and not the sort of things you would proactively put in your house or want to be there. Very functional. There are some that are slightly more pleasant. The one on the left is particularly nice and quite normalized, I think. But people want baths as well as showers. And the bathing options, even the expensive ones, do feel a little bit like being dunked in hot water. It is certainly not a naturalized bathing experience. So this is the task we set ourselves. Ideal Standard had what they call their freedom range, but they didn't have a bath. So they were the perfect partner for us to work with. We involved lots of users and some experts, some occupational therapists, physiotherapists, people who knew this market, but also worked with lots of older users as well, trying to understand what the key challenges were to bathing. And of course, the biggest one is getting into and out of the bath. And so we worked in quite a lot of detail about the actual mechanics of getting in and out of bath. And the problems that are faced. And as you'll see, this is an AVA showing that what people tend to do actually is they roll around under their forwards and then step out, and because it reduces the risk and involves less effort. One of the early foam prototypes, and again, the brief was it's got to be delightfully beautiful. And this is was one of the targets. You can see there's a shelf there to help you sit on and swivel, and there's a step at about where your feet are, so you can push yourself up and out of the bath. There's also little hand grabs and neck rests, so it is a comfortable and pleasurable bathing experience. And the idea was to make this bath look as normal as possible. This is one of the prototypes, and I miss those socks, some of my favorite. And this is, again, just trying it out with ourselves and with people, trying to develop empathy and understand the mechanics of getting in and out and whether it solved the problems we gave ourselves. And this is the launch at the Bathroom and Kitchen Show, where the product was launched to the market and co-branded with Red and Yellow. We're very happy with Ideal Standard to do that for us. And here's some of the marketing literature. And you can see they did not target it as a disability product. They target it as a family product, and that shelf has got many uses, not just for sitting and swiveling, but also putting your candles, your gin and tonic, whatever you like, taking into your bath with you. And this bath has turned into a luxury product now for Ideal Standard, but was designed to be as inclusive as possible. I'm not sure how much time I've got left. I think I'm fine, so I'm going to attempt to play a video for you, see if this works.
Beautiful and accessible. Concept Freedom's exquisite, high-quality bathroom products have been created with comfort and independence in mind. It's where thoughtful design meets timeless style. At 460mm high, the Concept Freedom bath is lower than a standard bath for more control when getting in and out. The reinforced ledge means that you can sit while swinging your legs over the bath before lowering yourself in, leaving you in full control at all times. The curves of the bath support the back and neck and aid movement, delivering an enhanced bathing experience that's enjoyable. The headrest offers firm yet comfortable support. The internal shape of the bath helps maneuver around the bath. When you're ready to leave, use the footrest to push yourself to sit up and turn over into a kneeling position, using the support rail to pull yourself up and out of the bath. Every aspect of your bath has been designed to make moving in and out simple and safe for bathers with various levels of physical ability. Select from our portfolio of Concept Freedom products to create or adapt your bathroom to suit the whole family, young and old bathers, and those with mobility needs. Encompassing intelligent design and elegant features, a Concept Freedom bath offers dignity and tranquility through different stages of life and health. Freedom to move, freedom to relax, freedom to live.
Fantastic. And I think that's it for me. Happy to hand back.
Thank you, Colin. Really, really good stuff. I think a really great place to frame this morning in terms of thinking, contribution, and the design aspect. So thank you. That was really, really good stuff. So what we're going to do now is David is going to help chair and pull out some of the questions. We probably won't be able to answer everything, but what we are going to do is we're going to take away all of the hashtag hope, barrier and opportunity feedback that we got in Alex's session, and Alex and I will go away and look at that. And we're also going to keep the Q&A and chat stuff and review that so that we can feed back in terms of all of our learning today. But let's start with some questions. David, do you want to pull some out of the chat?
Yeah, Julia, I was going to say a few words about KTM, but to be honest, having sat through the design component of today, which is obviously what you're majoring on, it's a bit incongruous to go into that. Just to say the KTN, along with, and there's been stuff in the chat as well, Innovate Edge and CPI, one of the catapult centers, we're all here to help you guys, you SMEs, with networking, partnering, and indeed collaborating on projects in the case of the catapult centers. So just bear us in mind, and I and the KTN are here to help. We'll act as an integration point, if you like. We can point you to the right people potentially within that family from the Innovate group as well. So feel free to drop me a line. My very last slide's got my email address on it. I think if it hasn't, I'm easy enough to contact. Most of you know me. And I think, yeah, we are here to help through connections and driving that innovation network for businesses. So to the questions, I'll just go and locate my little list of those now. I've got some questions for most of the speakers. And there's quite a lot for you, Julia. I think we should probably start with those there. The emphasis was definitely on the competition. So are you okay for me to run down a few for you, Julia?
Yeah, and I can see that George has joined. So
yes,
hopefully George will be my kind of side act on this, and we can get the questions answered together. But yeah, fantastic. Okay. So, and David, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No,
short.
It's fine. So don't worry about that. So clarification points mainly. The first one is to do with the grant in this case, this competition, which of course doesn't open till September. We're really preparing people quite well in advance in this case. But it's not, the grant's not supposed to be used for designing new products and services. It's designed for an improvement to existing products and services. Is that correct?
I think I need to make that point very clear. It's both. So we're looking for new stuff and old stuff reinvented. So absolutely for new stuff. And I think when you're presenting, sometimes you're not presenting exactly what you're thinking. So to make that very clear, absolutely we welcome new stuff, and we also welcome traditional ideas reinvented. So just to be very clear on that point. George, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to sort of say, so there is a real service component to this. And, you know, to give you an example, of the sort of follow-on thing that you might be sort of looking at. One of our Trailblazers projects, led by E.ON, the energy company, is looking at home improvements, but as a service. And as part of that service, some of their partners will design new products to meet that service. But it is really trying to get the impact in the market rather than a new product in an early stage, because we have other routes for early stage innovations through our investment partnerships and all the rest of it. So it's really trying to say, how will this actually make an impact? So think about, so I know Colin's given that really great some presentation around the ideal bathrooms, but what's the whole service that gets that bathroom into someone's home? Who would you have to work with, and how would that then allow your innovation to spread and grow?
Thank you, George. So there's a couple of questions, several about who's eligible in this competition. So the usual list is our academic friends. Are they able to collaborate or perhaps co-lead a project? And likewise for the third sector, for charities, where might they fit in as collaborators? Well, Julia, do you want to start off with that?
Yes, we welcome collaborations because through collaboration we obviously can see innovation extension. So we absolutely welcome collaborations. There's some rules in the grant funding in terms of how the allocation of the funds can be appropriated, but we make that very, very clear in the application process. So absolutely to collaborators. George, do you want to say anything about charities as a collaborative partner?
Well, again, the whole thing is a business. So many charities run businesses as part of their operation. So this is not grant funding to deliver a service in the way that you might get something from a local authority. This is grant funding to develop an innovation you're going to put into the market and secure revenues from. So charities that operate as trading arms, I think we should be applying as the trading arm, as the registered business, rather than typically rather than the charity. But there may be edge cases, in which case I think you need to talk. What I'd say is that the standard Innovate UK rules for academic research organisation participation also apply. So we wouldn't expect research organisations to account for more than 30% of the total eligible project costs, although they're the way that the funding work out, that number will be different in terms of the actual grant paid, but grants, so no more than 30% of the total eligible project costs, and typically for research organisations fully funded.
And just to push home a couple of points as well, that we do ask for applications to be business-led, and where obviously we welcome new ideas, going back to the presentation about being able to shape things that are sufficiently tangible so that we can apply the design stage gate. So we are looking for defined services and defined servitized products. So ideas, great, but definitely with this competition, we need something that is sufficiently defined to benefit from the stage gate. So just to make that point clear that came through and on the chat. Thank you.
Okay, there's another subtle question about where the design resource might be located. Are you expecting companies to go out and partner with designers, or is it equally valid that they have in-house teams which are already competent in this area and they can just demonstrate that they are using the correct kind of tools and techniques, let's say, the processes? Are both valid?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that both are valid. From my own experience on the other side of the fence, I never had any resources to engage any paid designers. I worked with users to get the design feedback, but we welcome all approaches as long as co-creation can be evidenced, and we see that co-creation process is sufficiently rigorous.
Very good. So another one around scope, which refers to the healthy aging challenge overall, in that it does sort of segment who we're targeting, you know, on the kind of the overall website, if you go and look at that. So could these solutions, do they have to, you know, sit in the 50+ age group or the 65+ age group? Or can these designs, I mean, the bath was a case in point, can they be totally age agnostic? But, you know, I mean, presumably that's actually the ultimate product and service, which is, as Colin said, capturing the whole audience. I believe that to be the case, but you know, the kind of scoping does put ages on things. So do you want to just talk about that for a little while, how that would fit in this competition?
Yes, I mean, the idea is, and I think it's come up a lot in this morning's workshop, is that everybody keeps their personality as they age. We all know what we like doing and how we like to live. It's that idea of flourishing as we grow older. So absolutely, a lot of businesses that have had discussions pre-competition already are doing things exactly in that stage, where there's kind of like a seamless extension that the service utility, where it applies to an aging market, but it's definitely the idea of extensibility. I mean, George, did you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, I mean, so there were the examples earlier of intergenerational kitchens. So, I mean, we're definitely interested in things that appeal to all ages. What we're asking is that whatever's done is age inclusive in what they do. And actually, Colin, this is fair and square in your area. I mean, if you wanted to add any more on that.
Yeah, I think it's that idea of trying to include as many people as possible. I think there's nothing more unforgivable than excluding just because you didn't bother thinking about it. I mean, it's fair enough, some products cannot include everybody, but as long as that's a deliberate decision, then it's one thing. But this competition, it is about design and aging. So it is about looking at that marketplace. But if you target, what we believe is that if you design a product and say it is for older people, it is very unlikely older people will want to buy it. Yeah. Mainly because nobody considers themselves old. In fact, any research that we've got on this, the idea of old is 15 years older than you are yourself. So this idea that it's for older people, then it is always for somebody other than me. And that's why inclusive design is important, that it looks desirable to as wide a population as possible, as well as delivering the benefits to all.
Thanks, Colin. So I'll leave some of the questions on that kind of competition side now, and we'll move to talk about design a bit more. So one of the first questions, and I think it could go to any of our latter speakers, but it actually came up when Ben was talking. Is there a particular design process or standard that has proven particularly beneficial in facilitating fast iteration for working with end users? So I don't know, Ben, if you want to have a stab at that, and we can have John, Julian, and Colin input as well. Is there a particular one? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many out there, and I think the most important thing is to remember that all of these tools and processes are a means to an end. So it's really about finding something that works to you. We tend to reference something called the double diamond framework that appeared on one of my slides, which is something that the Design Council in the UK have put together. It's not perfect. None of these ways of drawing a design process are perfect, because the reality of design is that it's never quite linear. It kind of goes all over the place. But that's a good way to start. So you could look at the double diamond framework. And I think if you look for any human-centered design process, you'll find you'll find any number of pretty colored diagrams with either 3 stages or 4 stages or 5 stages or a dozen stages. When you dig into them, what you find is they tend to all be doing the same kind of thing. They've just used different language. So yeah, I would tap human-centered design into Google. That's a good place to start.
So question now for Alex. There's a couple around this actually. So Alex, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way people interact quite a bit, obviously. We're hoping that we can put some of that behind us soon, but there's going to be a lingering change to the amount of face-to-face interaction, at least in the medium term, I think. So do you see that affecting and changing how you go about achieving citizen input to these kinds of projects? And is there anything you've done to adapt already? We'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, completely. I mean, we've had to change the way in which we operate massively since the pandemic began, because obviously we had to stop all face-to-face and in-person workshops. But as with anything, there is a bit of a silver lining there, where it has expedited people's possible digital literacy, or how comfortable they are in contributing online via things such as Zoom, because people have had to utilize Zoom to keep in contact with friends and family members. So I think actually that's something that we will continue to do, but we always operate a multi-method approach to any citizen involvement, because you do have the digitally excluded that you want to still involve in the design process. So we always do a mix of in-person workshops, insight workshops, as well as digital. But actually digital does mean that you can reach people who are outside of your locality. So you're not just limited to people within your region. So I think there are pluses and negatives, and it will definitely change the way in which we continue to operate post-pandemic. But you've just got to be mindful of that multi-method approach. As Colin said before, there is no reason, there's no excuse to not involve certain demographics or certain people or certain communities just because you haven't thought about accessing them, or you think you can't access them. There is always ways to access people. I think there was a comment as well around ensuring inclusivity around, say, people in rural communities, or people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Again, that multi-method approach enables you to have a bit of a catch-all, so you can ensure that you're involving a wide range of voices.
Thank you. Yes, that was going to be the follow-on. You picked that up nicely as well. No, don't worry. No, that's not a problem at all. So John and Julian, let's come to you a bit. These questions that popped up during your part of the show today. So the first question is, how would this design-led approach fit with complex system-wide change, where population health improvement targets are the focus? So you're not talking about individual products and services, you're talking about a more population approach. Is there something in that fits with this competition, for one thing, but also generally, how would you go about addressing that kind of challenge? John and or Julian, please, you can share it. I think John might have frozen again.
Sure. So actually, funnily enough, so funnily enough, we've my internet connection has been unstable, but so funnily enough, we're actually dealing with a number of people within our Design Age Accelerator program who are dealing with sort of system-wide solutions. And I think the biggest thing for me is thinking about route to market, because that's one of the things that is really, really important in terms of the overall mix. You may be thinking about the most fantastic solutions to the most intractable, difficult problems, but really understanding who's going to buy this, how they're going to buy it, what they're going to buy it in place of, is actually one of the really important things. And that design process about thinking about who your users are, who the end users are, who the influencers are, these are all really important interrelated marketing questions and design questions that I think people need to think about. Julian, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that. I think a lot of entrepreneurs in this sector start out with the idea of going straight B2C, but ultimately they have a B2B client in mind. And actually many products and services end up going B2C to B, in the sense that the the end scalable business customer that's actually responsible for operating within a service or regulated structure needs proof of concept and evidence from a user base in order to potentially procure that. So thinking that through, and some of those businesses start with a B2B client because they realize that the system-wide change is just too complex for them to address, so just revert to a B2B, a B2C solution initially, just to gain some market share.
Yeah, because we are talking very much in a consumer space here, aren't we? So there's another bit more specific one to do with risk assessment.
We're talking about the consumer space, but we are talking, but that doesn't negate the question of route to market. I mean, I know Colin would have some thoughts about this as well, because it's amazing how many people we talk to who say that this is something that the NHS seriously would want. Well, good luck, because getting access to the NHS and getting them to change the way they buy things is seriously difficult. I don't know, Colin, you were
yeah, for my sins, I was head of design at the NHS for many years, and it is very difficult to get anything to change in the NHS, full stop. I think the point that was made in these large, complex, systemic problems, following a rigorous design process is even more important, because there's 101 ways that your idea, no matter how good it is, will fail. And if you don't involve all the right stakeholders and get buy-in from all the right people, all it takes for one of them to say it won't work here, or we tried it last year, or we can't afford it, or we haven't got the budget, or I don't agree with you, or where's your evidence, and it will just fall down. So following a rigorous design, co-design process is really, really important in those big systemic challenges. Because it's healthcare, they like to take a sort of human approach to it. In a complex organization that resists change, design and innovation is seen as a kind of antibody, and the organism is designed to fight that level of change. It really wants to push back because all change is risk, and the NHS is risk averse. So you have to go through that process, and you have to some way solve the problem from the inside out, not the outside in. But it doesn't, it can't be done. It's just difficult.
Yeah. So
I'll just give another perspective from the consumer thing. So just as personal experience with older parents in the family moving into need care. Now, I knew all the technology that was available, but actually I couldn't actually get the whole service to solve the problem that we had supporting someone to be independent remotely. And I think this is where some of the stuff that Alex and Roz have talked about is really important, actually, not just to understand the product, but how it would actually work in practice, and how you create your market. And then particularly from what Colin was saying, without necessarily having to rely on the NHS or the underfunded social care services to suddenly decide that they want to sort of dip into their pockets and pay for it. So it is really important to understand that experience that you're trying to influence with your innovation, and design the whole proposition around it.
Yeah, because quite a few of the questions, George, were about NHS, potential involvement of NHS partners and hospitals. And it was my impression, so I could be wrong because I'm not UKRI, but that essentially that wasn't really where you were working, that sector. There's an interface there, very much so, but the reason I used the word consumer early on in this little discussion was because that's what was my impression. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, are you expecting to see NHS partners?
Yeah, so the situation's changed actually, and so while we're not trying to do something that's for straightforward clinical care, that would sort of require nice approvals and all the rest of it, and a really difficult route to market, partly because actually there are other funding streams for that. The situation changed really for two reasons, both sort of semi-related. One is that with integrated care in England and similar sorts of moves in health boards in our other nations. So-called hospitals actually are increasingly interested in out-of-hospital care, and what's of particular interest to us is self-care. And there is a particular situation now, if you read the papers, with sort of waiting lists of over 5 million long and people talking about waiting years and years, that actually there is a need for innovation that will help people maintain their independence while they're sort of effectively waiting for care. So we are relaxing the boundaries around what we're doing, and the other related bit is that there is a move towards what's called in some quarters social prescribing, so non-medical approaches to managing health, and we think there's a lot of scope for innovation that would actually appeal in that social prescribing sort of area as well. So we're not as 2 years ago would have been very strict about absolutely don't touch the NHS. Now we're sort of saying you can, but you actually need to be really cognizant of the business model that you're going to be operating in working with the NHS, because there is what a famous valley of death for innovators who come up with good things and then find no one actually buys it, and your enterprise doesn't survive not having customers for that long.
True. Yes, thank you. Yes, that's definitely part of my day job as well. I've got one here. It's really more some feedback, but a question mixed in there. It's changing tack a wee bit for Roz and Alex, really. So a lot of comments, Roz. I don't know if you could see the chat or not. People were very impressed and very enthused and inspired by what you were saying. So they like to go on communicating with you. So I think that, I don't think it would be fair for you to have your email address out there and have dozens of companies pile in, as it were, but just so you know, people will be very keen to talk to you, and I'm sure your fellow voice constituents. So Alex and or Roz, do you want to say something about that? How maybe that can be continued after today's chat?
Would you like me to go first, Roz, or with you?
Oh, okay. Yes, I think just listening to the past conversations, communication has opened up so much more for voice during the pandemic. We've realised that older people enjoy using Zoom and other systems, and it just allows so many more people to get involved. People who have really valuable experience, but they can't travel, or they have disabilities, or no transport, all sorts of things. And I think also just listening to the last bit about the NHS, having had quite a bit of recent experience as a relative during the pandemic, is the sheer lack of communication there is between the hospitals and the families of people who they desperately want to be involved in the care of. So that I think there's a huge amount of work to be done there. And I think in voice, you've got so many people who have been former patients or carers or, involved in hospitals in all sorts of ways. They sit on boards and what have you. And I think it's an area that voice could develop very much. I hope that's right, Alex.
Completely. And it was so lovely to see all of the comments coming through whilst Roz was speaking, because it just really shows the value of hearing from users from a public perspective. And if you are a business and you're interested to work with voice and hear more from people like Roz, then do get in touch with us, and we're more than happy to have a chat, have a look to see where you are in your on the innovation pathway in terms of your product design, and we can look to see how we can best involve the voices of voice members in the future design of your product or service.
And just to kind of continue that, and another point that was raised was that at least one person was concerned that trying to build your own citizen feedback group, reference group, whatever you call them generically, would be quite an undertaking, and they've already got voice. I don't know if there are any others, but can you actively participate in projects as partners, or are you going to be spread too thin? If there's 200 people on the call, I'm sure that they won't all submit, but maybe they will. Spread too thin with 200 potential applicants trying to come at you. I don't know, how do you want to field the inquiries, Alex? What's the next step?
I mean that would be a lovely problem to have. Yeah, always feel free to get in touch. And in terms of reinventing the wheel and creating your own citizen communities, I mean, we've been building the voice community for 14 years now. So we've got a really good kind of national and growing international reach, but we're also a bit of an umbrella organisation where we have strong partnerships with other with patient groups, with other citizen networks, so we can actually support businesses in reaching those other organisations. But yeah, please feel free to get in touch, and we will support in any way we can.
Thank you, Alex. Be prepared, I think. There's a couple of more practical points. Again, I think I'll come back to for Julia, perhaps George. So there's a few people are asking if there was any way that their concept, in terms of what they would put into this competition, could be discussed to see if it's in scope, and just kind of fettle it without having to wait till September to see if it would be something valuable or not. Can they speak to you or Julia or anyone else? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We want. I've seen that was one of the other things I wanted to make sure was clear before we all finished today. Very happy to talk to people. I've been talking to lots of different people already, and it's often very helpful to have a one-to-one chat. So very happy to do that. And I also just wanted to make it clear about the timeframes as well, in terms of some quite specific dates. The competition actually opens on the 21st of September and closes on the 17th of November. So there is time to have further discussion and to have those conversations about whether people think that they've got something that's right to apply with. So I just wanted to make those points clear about when the actual competition window is. So yeah, absolutely. I think I'll put my email address in the chat again as we go, but I think Jane's already dropped in. Very happy to have those conversations.
Thank you, Julia. Here's a question which I think is quite a tough one for you to answer, because it's something that generally Innovate UK type competitions anyway leave with the partners to deal with in their consortium agreements. But there's a question around IP here. With such a wide and diverse range of users and stakeholders contributing, do you see any particular issue with intellectual property as it stands within this kind of collaboration? Is there anything you'd like to say on that subject? And as I say, it is a bit of a tough one, so I was saving it up.
George will probably want to say something after me, but I'll say from my perspective, my experience of co-creation, I believe it's easy enough to have to keep IP separate from user feedback mechanisms, but we'd always ask people to seek advice. And I think, George, do you want to come in and say any more on that?
So yeah, interesting. So I think the IP situation, let's just talk about what we mean by intellectual property, because it's not just patents. There's a lot of know-how and things like that, particularly when you talk about services, which is potentially less protectable. So the piece that Julia was picking up, the confidentiality agreements that you would have with anyone sort of contributing would be part of that. But I'd say more generally, where the IP issues are more likely to come in is in your collaborations. And I think it's really important when you're pulling together a collaboration to be really clear on what the role of each partner is, and that they're not there's not potential for competition downstream that actually means that partnership isn't sustainable. And we have seen examples where actually the first stage has been in part to work through, do the partners all agree exactly what their role is and where they are, and where that's really clear, there's then a win-win for everyone involved in that. and out of that should also be very clarity on who owns what IP, who's bringing background IP into the work on which foreground IP is going to be developed as part of that proposition. So it is not straightforward, but you definitely need to go in with your eyes open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's usually left to the projects to sort out, in my experience from watching Innovate grants go through. So here's one which might open.
Sorry, David, can I just quickly add something on to that? I think
certainly, Julia, yes.
NDAs, and you can Google an NDA and download one. They're a good starting point in terms of getting that first point of protection in. So that was just one more point I wanted to make before we closed on that. Sorry,
so there's kind of a comment on the question here. It's for the designers on the call, John, Julian, and Ben, I think, and Colin, of course. So they were talking about the sort of the various case studies that John and Julian were kind of highlighting in their presentation, and this particular question is around the intangible aspect of design to do with coolness. So if you're looking at competitor analysis and things like that, is this something which you can quantify? You know, competing products might have that you don't have, and how do you give something that zing overall, and how do you identify it and then replicate it in your own products? What do you think, chaps?
Do you want me to start?
Go for it.
Coolness, well, it's obviously defined by the user, not by the designer. You know, what is cool to one is not cool to the other. Or by cool, I mean, I suppose we're all talking about aesthetically pleasing, desirable, has some sort of value beyond the commercial value of materials made, used to create it. And yes, of course, it can be designed in. It's what half of the design industry are obsessed by. And almost most of the creative industries, whether it be music or poetry or whatever, is all about joy, desirability. And I think that's what we've done wrong in this industry for a long time. We have designed a lot of very technically able products, and we've stopped at the technical ability, you know, our mobility aids, or aids around your house, or whatever they might be. We've stopped at this serves a function, therefore use it, and forgotten that if people don't want it, they won't buy it. And I think Ben, if it wasn't, I apologize, I'm going to steal that photograph of the cupcake and the apple, because it's the best way I've seen that put. No matter how good it is and how valuable it is, if actually the other one tastes better, that's the one a lot of people are going to choose. So you have to design in desirability, coolness, whatever that means for the particular audience, because we all want to be surrounded by wonderful products and services as we age, not horrible, stigmatizing walking aids and blue meanies.
Does anybody else want to weigh in on that one, or have we?
Well, I'll just quickly. I mean, I'll just augment what Colin's already said. But it's amazing how, having worked in marketing, branding all your life, and you know, working with companies who segment the hell out of a market, and then get to 65 plus, as if somehow that's a catch-all, and over 65 everyone's a homogeneous bunch. And the reality is, Colin quite rightly said, you know, we in many ways we're more nuanced and more design savvy as we get older, and actually the opportunities are greater as we get older than when we're younger. Way to finish it.
Very good. So I'm going to ask one more question of the group. I think it might be something that falls to George, because it's not really a question to do with this competition, but it's more looking ahead. And with George saying there's been a softening of the kind of approach to involving the medical profession, the NHS, it's probably an interesting one to pose. So it goes like this: how do we develop the skills, education, training opportunities for healthcare professionals, carers, and citizens and individuals to better understand their own condition, as well as the ever-changing, and hopefully we're adding to it as well, market out there for products and services, so that they can actually have manage to piece together what's going on? How is that, or is that a service in itself that perhaps we need to see coming through? So as a last question and kind of thought-provoking, maybe a set of responses, I think I'd like to pose that, and I'm happy to first come, first served in terms of who wants to answer that one.
Well, okay, you pointed to me. So,
sorry, George.
Firstly, I think you've thrown down the gauntlet on what is a really good innovation challenge, and part of that challenge is a question about, is there a business model in there? I think both this competition that we're talking about today and the competition that we're launching later this month to support social ventures touches on this space. I'm not going to answer how you educate the world in all of these sorts of things. But what I would say is I'm really encouraged by the amount of effort that is going in, certainly in NHS England, but actually has been going in across the different NHSs across the UK for some time, into social prescribing and non-medical interventions to promote health. I mean, I think Professor Samura Gray would say, you know, if exercise was a pill, it would be the best pill ever invented. But it actually doesn't actually have the level of academic evidence that a pharmaceutical pill has, and so has always been operating at a disadvantage. I think what we're seeing is a movement now within healthcare that actually says there are these things, and it's not just it's not just going to the gym sort of exercise. It's building activity into your everyday life. It's thinking about how engagement in arts, in nature and things like that actually supports building that thing. And we're seeing, we've got research projects we've funded in that space. We've got some early stage innovation projects in our catalysts in that space. It would be great to see more services coming into that space. And indeed, in COVID-19, we funded a couple of projects that actually got us surprisingly long way on small amounts of money, introducing arts, volunteering and all that sort of thing. So not exactly an answer to your question, but there is a movement, and I think that means there's an opportunity for business-minded people to think about how they will offer the market things that the market is beginning to want.
Very good, thank you, George. I think, to be honest, with 3 minutes to spare, we maybe should wrap up Q&A, unless, Julia, that there's something, because I know you were looking at them as well, that you wanted to emphasize before we kind of move off this part of the day. But I think I'm exhausted my list there now.
No, thank you, David. I think we've picked out the most salient ones, and we're certainly going to keep the chat and Q&A and have a look at it post this event. So thank you all of the panelists so much for today. It was a delight to work with you in preparing this and delivering this. So thank you all for caring so much. And thank you, Eileen, for making our ship sail so smoothly. And really looking forward to hearing from you and connecting further. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll say goodbye.